I literally had a client say these same things to me. I went through postpartum anxiety and a little bit of postpartum depression, and I was a mess, and I just want to avoid that happening again. So I'm seeking out preemptive care.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to part 2 of my interview with Shayna, who's a relationship therapist, answering all your questions about relationships, communication, boundaries, and more. So last week we had part 1 of my interview, so if you missed part 1, I highly recommend you go back and watch that one first, as there's tons of information that will just be awesome for you. So this is part 2. We're talking specifically about boundaries and communication techniques in relationships. And finally, she's going to answer your questions about relationships that you sent in to me. So can't wait to just jump right in, and here we go. How do you suggest, setting up boundaries where, another family member is trying to pry themselves in the middle? How would you set up those boundaries?
So I would talk with my partner and kind of tell them what's going on and why it's frustrating me, and why it's, why I feel like my boundaries aren't being respected, and what I actually need. That's an important thing, to say what you do need, and then figuring out what's the best way to go about this. So first of all, we want to get clear on what's going on here. Like, you want your partner to be on the same page as you on what is and isn't okay. Because otherwise, if only one partner is kind of setting these boundaries and respecting them, people will sense that and they're going to push back on that. But if they see that you're, a team together here and are both on the same page, oh, okay, these are the rules when we come to this house. And they might like that, they might not. But if that's what you need to function well, that's what you need. Mm-hmm. You have to respect your own boundaries. So getting clear with each other, and then thinking about what's the best way to kind of bring this up. Is it his mom or is it your mom? Do you feel more comfortable bringing it up? Does he feel more comfortable bringing that up? And then going forward and having that conversation. And then also figuring out, is this something that I want to just call up my mom and just bring up point blank that this is something we need to talk about? Or is this something that I want to wait till it pops up? Because if I tell her that she's doing this and this, she'll say, what? I don't do that. But if I want to wait till that kind of a situation pops up and say, hey, this is something I actually wanted to talk to you about. This thing that you're doing, I know that it's coming from a good place, but it's not really helping me. It's not what I want. It's not what we want. So, can you please refrain from doing this, this, and this?
So as we're kind of talking about communication and the importance of it, can you talk about the difference between a harsh and a soft startup?
Yeah. So this is one of my big ones that I like talking about. So when we are frustrated or upset by something and we want somebody to change something, our natural reaction is to have a harsh startup, which is basically being critical. And the downside of that is that when you are critical, you are inviting the other person to be defensive. And those two things are really negative communication habits in a partnership, because the person who's criticizing feels unheard when the person gets defensive, and the person who is defensive feels attacked. So both people are not happy. You're not going to get the result that you want. And studies show that 90% of conversations, the outcome is influenced by the way the conversation begins. So it's not 100% of the time. Sometimes you could have a conversation that starts out totally chill and somebody just blows up because they had a bad day and you just pushed the wrong button. And sometimes you can have a conversation that starts off really screaming, and then you both just start laughing about it because something funny happens. But that's not the majority of the time. Majority of the time, it's going to kind of follow the pattern of how it started. So let's say you are frustrated that your partner doesn't help out with bath time. And so saying you never give the baby baths and I'm doing it all. And then they're going to be like, what do you mean? I did this, this, and this. So now you feel that they completely didn't hear you and disregarded what you're frustrated by. And they feel oh, you're attacking me. You don't see any of the things I do. You're saying that I never do anything. And then they're also going to say, remember that time that I bathed them after we came home from your mom's house and it was really late? And, that just starts a fight. In general, those always never comments, we learn in the SATs that those are always bad answers. In relationships, using those always and nevers are also pretty bad. Then with a softened startup, you're getting across that same message, but in a way that it will be received far better, and that you'll actually get more of the result you want. So there's 3 parts to a softened startup. You want to state what you're feeling, because if you're saying like something that happened, there's two different perspectives going on. They see what happened from their perspective, you see what happened from your perspective. Kind of like when somebody brushes you off, you feel like they completely ignored you. Maybe they were like completely not present because a family member of theirs is in the hospital and they just got a phone call about that. And so they're like in their head really stressed. And so you think they ignored you. They're like really like scared about a family member being sick. And so your lines are lost. There's a miscommunication there. When you state how you're feeling, that's your own experience that that person can't say isn't true. Like, maybe I didn't mean to ignore you, but you were hurt. Like, I can't say you weren't hurt. I could say I didn't ignore you, but I can't say that you weren't hurt. So you state what you're feeling. You state the problem in a neutral way, because again, you don't want to make them feel attacked, because that's just going to get them defensive. And then you state what you need. We so often say what we don't like, but we forget to say what we need. And this goes back to kind of the setting the boundaries with a family member. You want to tell them what you want, not just telling them what they're doing wrong. So in the case with the bath, you can say, I feel really burnt out at the end of the day after doing everything and then having to also do bath time every night. So I'm saying, like, I feel burned out that at the end of a long day, I'm also doing bath time. So I'm not blaming him, I'm not blaming my partner for that. I'm just saying how I'm feeling and what the situation is. Do you think that you can do bath time 2 or 3 times a week? Telling them this is what I need from you. Mm-hmm. And that will hopefully get a better response. And maybe they'll say, I can't do bath time, but I could help you out more with this, so you're a little less stressed. Or, you know, I could do bath time once, but then maybe do this a different day. So that at least opens up the lines of communication for having a more positive outcome.
So these last couple of questions actually came in from people in the Facebook group. So I'm going to read them to you. Okay, here's this first one. My husband is truly my best friend. I know things will change between my husband and I once the baby comes, but what kinds of things can we make a habit of so that we continue to be best friends?
Okay, so one of them is really implementing that one-on-one time and looking at what makes you feel like you're best friends right now. What are you doing? Like, do you go out to drink or like go grab coffee on a Sunday morning? Do you play board games? Do you like watch shows that you have in common? What are those things you're doing now that make you feel connected in that way? And be conscious about keeping as many of those as you can once the baby comes. Understandable if you can't do all of it, because you know your schedule is just going to be different and your responsibilities are going to be different. But like another post of mine said, the things that you did to start your relationship and grow in your relationship are also going to be those same things that maintain your relationship. But maintenance is always harder than the growth period, because you feel settled, so you feel less you feel like it's less necessary to make certain investments, but they're still necessary. Like when you're dating, you treat each other so politely, you treat each other like friends, you treat each other like someone you care about. But then once you're kind of married and there's a kid in the picture and you're like stressed out and there's so much going on, you feel like he knows I appreciate that, or he knows that I this, he knows that I that. But you used to say it straight up. You used to be explicit about those things. Try to still be explicit about those things. You used to say thank you when he brought you a cup of coffee. Now you're like, oh, he knows I appreciate it and I'm dealing with the baby, so I'm too distracted to tell him thank you. No, he still wants to hear thank you. Same way you would want to. And on that note, I just want to throw in there, a lot of times people think like, why is it the mom's responsibility? Why is it my responsibility with both of us here? And it's not either one of your responsibility more than the other. The moms are just the people that I happen to work with. Mm-hmm. And moms are typically the ones who are more keyed into some of these things, because women tend to be more emotional than men. Mm-hmm. That's not a blanket rule, but it is the common thing. So it is the majority. And because we are more aware of these things, we're the ones who typically ask about them. So if you're the one asking, then you're going to be the one who can start making some changes. And it doesn't mean it's your fault or your responsibility. But when you do make changes, that's going to create ripple effects where they're going to respond to you in turn.
So this next one says, how can I keep the love alive after the second child is born? How to adjust to a new family of 4. Adjusting to a family of 3 was very hard for us after 9 years of it being just us. Lots of arguments and postpartum depression for me. We've only been a family of 3 for 2 years, and the baby is due in a couple of months.
So first of all, in some ways, moving from 1 to 2 is a little bit easier because you're more prepped. And I've had this come up with clients that like reached out to me when they were pregnant with baby number 2. And they're like, the first time around, everything was super stressful. And like, I went through postpartum. Like, I literally had a client say these same things to me. I went through postpartum anxiety and a little bit of postpartum depression, and I was a mess. And I just want to avoid that happening again. So I'm seeking out preemptive care. And being aware of those things is one of the biggest things that's going to help you out in not experiencing it in the same way. Because when we know why something is happening or that something can happen, we're more prepared for it, and we can navigate it better than when it just like hit us in the face and like we had no clue. So that's really important that you are more aware of that. And then setting some things in place so that when and if it does happen, you are a little bit more prepared, because you're going to, even though you're aware of it and like you're trying to be prepared, you're still going to have those hormonal changes. You're still going to have a lot of schedule changes. If your kid is already 2 years old, they're probably sleeping pretty well. And now you're going to go back to having a baby and dealing with that. So figuring out what you need to put in place, whether that's getting a little bit more help if you can find somebody, whether that is having communication with your partner beforehand of like, now that we're going to have 2 kids, these are going to be my responsibilities, these are going to be your responsibilities. And knowing that that's not set in stone. Like, there's some days where you're going to be like completely bombed and just need more help from your partner. There's some days where they're going to be like really held up at work and they're going to need you to do more. And that's the thing, you're a partnership. It's figuring out those things step by step as they go on. But having these conversations beforehand and figuring out beforehand, what are some things that we can put into place so we can manage this more? Maybe you'll be more like, I know my husband takes care of a lot of the needs of our older daughter once our second daughter came into the picture. And at the same time, there are also times where I need him to hold the baby so that I can be present for my toddler, because she needs that mommy time too. So it's having these conversations and figuring out, how are we going to navigate this in the best way for our family, knowing that there will be times when you feel frustrated and stretched thin and burned out, but knowing that that's not something that's wrong between you and your partner. It's the situation, and the situation will get better. There will be stressful times, kind of like when you're going out on a first date, you're stressed before, but like, it'll be fine. Or when you're starting a new job, that first, like, that transition period and getting to know what you're going to have to do is going to be difficult, but you're going to get it done. You're going to learn the stuff, and then you're going to laugh like, oh, why was I so stressed about starting this job? It is so smooth. But it wasn't smooth those first couple of weeks when you're being trained in. So same thing with the baby. You're going to have a lot of adjustments. It's going to change, but you'll get there. And if you realize that like symptoms of postpartum depression and anxiety are coming up and you need help, go to a therapist for a few appointments if you need to. Get help, because ultimately that benefits everybody.
So I always like to kind of end these interviews with, I call them like fun thinking questions to get the different perspective of each person I'm interviewing. So if you could have a billboard made today where you could share one tip with moms everywhere, what would you have it say?
So this one sounds funny, but I would have it say, your partner is not the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we get frustrated, there are things going on. And as people, naturally, we look for someone or something to blame. And it typically ends up being that person in closest proximity. And like, we don't want to blame our baby because they're so cute, right? They're like this innocent little thing. So we end up blaming our partner. It's not, your partner is not the enemy. You're frustrated by a situation, whether that's you doing more of the work, but that's not because your partner's a bad person. That's because you need to have a conversation about responsibility and task sharing. It's not you against them. It's you and them together against whatever the problem is that's stressing you out, and figuring out ways to work with that.
So where can everyone follow you on social? You have such awesome advice and awesome posts. So let everyone know where they can follow you on social.
So my Instagram is Love After Baby. kind of inspired by like the saying, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby and a baby carriage. But bringing back the love after baby, because that kind of can sometimes feel like it's fizzling out, and was inspired by, you know, those Facebook posts I was seeing from moms saying like, I'm not sure I love him anymore. So love after baby, that's where you can find me. And, you know, DM with like any specific questions where I can't get too detailed, but like, you know, if you wanted to work together or anything like that, that's where you can reach me. And if you're not in a place where you want to work together, but you just want to follow along for the tips, you'll learn from that too.
Awesome. Cool. Well, everyone be sure to check out Shayna on Instagram. Got a lot of awesome posts there. And thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today. There was so much valuable information here. So thank you. All right, guys, thanks for watching part 2 of my interview with Shayna. I hope you were able to walk away with some amazing tips that can help your relationship today. And if you want to learn more from Shayna, which she has the most amazing posts, check her out on Instagram, Love After Baby. She's got some awesome tips, and she does these cool like reel videos that are awesome. So check her out, Love After Baby. And thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mom Talks with Krista. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and click on the subscribe button. It should be down here somewhere. We release new episodes every single Wednesday. And if you're not following us yet, be sure to follow us at Mommy Knows Best on Instagram. And remember, if you're watching this and doubting yourself, you are a great mom. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next week.